Hi there, it's me, Jordan Van Haslo. Welcome to Jordan Van Haslo and Friends live on Hot 702.5 FM Las Vegas. Let's get on with the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Showtime with Jordan Van Haslo and Friends right here on Hot 702.5 FM Las Vegas. I feel like it's old home week. The last few weeks, we've had friends return to us. Like we had Ryan Newcomb. We caught up with our friend Lisa Gay. And it's always really fun to have people come back and catch up and see what they've been up to. Our guest today was actually in a group discussion we had, must have been a year ago, might have been more than a year ago. I don't know. Time passes so quickly, with Ryan Newcomb. He's a fantastic producer, and I can't wait to see what he's been up to since we last spoke. Nikon Kwantu. Hi, Nikon.
How are you? How's everything?
Everything is wonderful. As I mentioned before we started recording, I got my kombucha and my mug. So what have you been up to? When did we last catch up?
It wasn't during the past summer. You know, it's funny. I'm time has escaped me. It's like before COVID, before the pandemic. And
you knew when everything was ready.
Yeah.
It's been a little over a year.
Yeah, just about a year.
Happy New Year. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary. Happy New Year. Everything.
How were your holidays?
It was good. So I traveled. I was in Japan during the holidays. New experiences.
Business or pleasure?
For me, anytime I travel, I always think about business opportunities. So when I was out there, I was thinking, wow, you know, what they need out here is Black people.
Which is what I'm sure the Japanese government is also saying.
Yeah. Like, they need Black businesses out here. That's what I was thinking. But
how long were you there?
So I was there from the 22nd of December to January 2nd.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still sort of feeling the effects of the time shift, because it's like a whole they're 14 hours ahead. So it's a whole shift in your brain.
Did you enjoy spending New Year's and getting to experience New Year's ahead of the entire world? You know, whenever you watch CNN or whatever, they're like, it's New Year's in Tokyo, it's New Year's in Sydney, and you know, we're all sitting here like with our hats on, just like waiting.
You know, it's funny because since we were traveling, I think we were traveling New Year's, so it didn't really compute, honestly, because we were where we were on the 31st.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we were like in the mountains.
Okay.
So we weren't like in a major city at that time. We were coming from the mountains into this, like, yeah, it just
it was just like, nah, it's
it was basically, I'm getting to that, it was like and
I always think about that, you know, because like when you travel that way, you go across the international date line and you lose a day. And I always said to myself, when I have like a really big birthday, I might just spend it in the air so I can like not acknowledge it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Not acknowledge. I was gonna say like, you know, it's like keep doing it.
That day didn't happen.
Yeah. Nice. I like that. I like it.
So we haven't seen each other and we haven't spoken to each other in a year, a little over a year.
Yeah.
What have you been up to outside of Japan?
Yeah. So I've been making some, I was making some shifts. Still an animation producer, but I want to expand some of what I'm doing in the and it's still in the same sort of global medium of film and entertainment. And I've decided that I want to start working behind a physical camera. Like I want to start shooting and editing in certain aspects, like color grading and stuff like that. And I just got into I got attached to a couple of documentary and reality show projects that are coming up in the future. So
how are you liking that? I actually just started this past summer. I started working for a documentary production company, and this is the first time I've ever like really immersed myself in that particular medium, and I'm finding it really fascinating.
Yeah, it's very fast. Well, okay, so the documentary side I've worked in before, right? So And my wife is a documentary filmmaker, and so I'm around that a lot, right? So that's not, some of it is different and strange and like, okay, fascinating, as you said. Some of it I'm kind of used to just being around it. And I've done animation for a couple of documentaries, and in fact, I just did a document, not just, but it just got the last documentary that I did was called Lowndes County. It's on Lowndes County. I'm so sorry that I'm forgetting the full title. And the Road to Black Power, Lowndes County and the Road to Black Power.
Okay.
And I actually used two animators that were recommended by your producer Jose. And that documentary just it won an Emmy recently.
Oh, congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah. It
I
won an
keep telling Jose, I think he missed his calling. I think Jose should actually be a recruiter, right? Because like like the Malcolm Gladwell
Emmy.
books, like he's such a connector. He keeps in touch with everyone.
Yeah.
And he always, whenever he's like, oh, you should reach out to that person, that always tends to be like the perfect person for you to reach out to.
Yeah. He's brilliant at that. He's brilliant at other things, but he's also brilliant at that. And he wants to downplay that. But anyway, so I did that, and so just to keep on track of what have I been up to, that was one of the latest things. And so that just won an Emmy, a News and Doc Emmy, I believe it was.
Wait, so what's it about? So Lowndes County, is that an
Lowndes
actual
County. So
county?
it was one of the stops during King's March, Martin Luther King's March. And we just had it, he just had his birthday, to Selma. When he marched on Selma, Lowndes County was one of the places that they went through, was actually the longest stop along that march, was when they were at Lowndes County. But anyway, so Lowndes County had a whole voter registration drive and push, leave after that. And so they did a whole documentary just about that process, and Stokely Carmichael was involved in it, and just the people of Lowndes County and just how they came together and really pushed to get Black voters registered and really get in positions of power for themselves. And so yeah, we did that. And then, so since then, I've been really contemplating adding more live action to my resume and sort of know-how.
Yeah, I like that. So it's because did you came up in animation? Was that like when you were like a young pup and kind of figuring out what it is you wanted to do? Were you like a person who was like, oh my God, I want to work in animation, I want to make cartoons, or how did that come about?
So when I was a kid, my cousin and I, when we used to play with toys and action figures, we would also make up stories about superheroes, and we would create our own superheroes. And what I realized at a certain point, I couldn't shake out of my head that all of the superheroes that we would create ourselves, I'm not talking about like the Supermans and it is Batmans and stuff, the ones that we would create, and we would give them their own name, like they were still white in my head, right? I still didn't see me in those roles, and I was creating the characters. So as I got older, and realized I wanted to do something with writing, I wanted to do some form of writing. I thought it was going to be journalism, but then I went from rapping to doing poetry, and then really like storytelling. I like storytelling in no matter what, right? So I decided, animation is the best vehicle because it can actually, we can see that's like the perfect vehicle, obviously, to show superheroes. And I grew up watching superheroes on television, Super Friends, and whatever form it came on Saturday morning cartoons, right? So I wanted to create that for myself, and got and really got a chance to see why you don't see it in animation as often in terms of Black people in those positions, in those with those images. But yes, that is, you know, from a kid, that's what I wanted to do. You can say there's a through line that can take you to animation. When I was a kid, like ultimately I was inspired by animation.
Well, I think also because you can kind of do anything, right? Like versus
Yeah,
live
exactly.
action, like live action, we're here, but like animation, we can transport to another universe. We can kind of do anything. You said you had an opportunity to see why there weren't like Black people or you know in animation. What do you mean by that? Or like what did you see and what did you
Yeah,
come to
so
understand?
so I think it's like with anything, right? When you're in a certain field, you get to see what are the stories that executives are looking for. Like I remember at one point in the early 2000s, I did a lot of pitching. We went to LA and pitched our show and did all of this stuff and pitched different concepts because I always had a lot of concepts, right? You know, a lot of pitch decks, Bibles, character Bibles, you know, give people visuals. It wasn't just like, you know, because you hear stories about elevator pitches, right? Like somebody
Mm-hmm.
see somebody in the elevator and you just say a couple of lines and they're like, I want to make that, right? I don't know anything about that, right? So you have to come with visuals. And I got jobs off of the what they were able to see, but they
Mm-hmm.
didn't want my product. They
Right.
wanted my production,
Right.
right?
They wanted the
So
work,
they wanted the work, but they didn't want the look,
the
right?
vision, or what?
They
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
want the thing. We did wind up making a pilot. I wound up making a pilot that IFC commissioned with the idea it could go into a series. And that did have a Black character, but it was a comedy. It was basically like a podcast, you know, it was like called Public Access, and it was like before they were podcasts, it was public access, and it was this character. And
Is
but
it
then
animated or live action?
it was animated. It was animated. And IFC, you know, of course they went in another direction. They said, "Oh no, we're not doing that anymore. We want to do unscripted. We want to do like reality stuff."
Right. So it sounds
And
like it was kind of like when I think about the shows or movies about uh, public access, my mind immediately goes to Weird Al Yankovic and UHF. You remember the
yeah,
movie
there you go.
UHF?
There you go. There you go. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it was like this guy. It's totally like it's funny, right? Because now if we did it, it would be so familiar, right? It's basically what you watch on social media every day, right? Like
Hmm.
somebody getting in front of a camera and doing something outrageous. And in fact, you know what it was really like? What's how am I missing out on his name? This is a Black comedian. He does what was that show? Glick.
Glick? I don't know if I know Glick.
But it's a Black Andre
Eric Andre?
Eric Andre, right? So Eric
Okay,
Andre's
okay.
show, it was like an animated version of that,
Got it. Okay.
right? But it had like but it had a little bit more like political things in there, right? But it was basically an animated version of that show.
So it's the Eric, like this is me like going back to my time in the studio. So it's like Eric Andre meets like the Boondocks.
Sure.
Sure.
No, but I mean, I wouldn't have, yeah, basically. Yeah, yeah. Right. And so, and you know, that's an interesting, okay, I like the merger of that. Bring it back.
I feel like I have to think about that for a second.
Yeah, like I was like, well, no, I wouldn't have thought of that. But then now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, wait a minute, there's something pitchable. But so yeah, so that was one of the things that was probably one of the only things in terms of animation that someone actually said, hey, we're gonna put some money behind it and you know and get it out there. But like I said, it was just a pilot. It was you know, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes. No, not
Yeah.
even 10 minutes, maybe like 5, 7 minutes. So yeah, so but what I began to realize is that that's just not what networks are looking for. There are definitely a number of Black and brown animated shows throughout time, throughout the history of animation. But they're usually not well funded, they don't last that long, and the creators don't go on to make other products, right? It's
Right.
usually a one-off, and it does whatever it does, and then that's the end of that. And then
Have you found that changed at all? Like I don't really watch a lot of animation, but what the one thing that I clearly see is how um, the industry has actively brought people of color into the story. Like if you look at any movie now, there's always
right,
like an interracial couple. There's
right,
always that was like, even if it almost doesn't even make sense, it's like they plop
right,
some
right,
type of a brown person or some
right.
type of a gay or queer person into the medium. Do you see that happening at all with animation?
In terms of characters,
Yeah.
yes, I do see that there is an attempt at like top level diversity.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not significant because diversity is interesting, right? So we have diversity in image, right? So we can have a show that has let's say like seven characters, right? Seven main characters, right? And three of those characters, hell, let's say four of those characters are some combination of people of color and um maybe even some LGBTQ character, might even have disability, person that is differently able, you might have a gambit of things with four different characters,
Mm-hmm.
but their culture isn't represented.
Right.
Who they are in terms of what they look like, and so there's a visual representation of them, but who they are isn't represented. And so when you have mainstream culture is always represented. They don't have to say it, right? Like it is always represented. And when you have other cultures, the way that you show that being represented is by how they interact with one another, and then how other people come into their culture and react to them, right?
Right.
So no, I don't see that at all. Like that's not, unless the show is just about that. Like if you're watching Dora the Explorer, you're going into her world so that you can also learn Spanish, right?
Right.
So that's the purpose of it, right? What was this show? Uh, Me How Kai Lam, I think what it was. It was an animated show a while. It was it was a similar concept, right? So you're gonna
Right.
learn Chinese, right? Me How Kai Lan. Okay, there we go. And but if that's not the point, like you're not really going to get involved in the culture. And so um and that's true to form with work, right? Like when we go to jobs and we go to work, and sometimes you can be in a meeting. Jose and I worked together um for a while. And one of the things that I noticed when we were in meetings is how, obviously, people of color always talk about code switching, right? So we code switched to sound a certain way in our meetings, but they didn't. So what I realized was like, wow, like we're code switching so that we make them feel comfortable, but other people don't code switch to sound more professional. In fact, the most of I've heard more cursing and more inappropriate language
From
from
the
from the people that we were code switching to, you know, right? So because that's a part of their culture, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a part of the culture, right? So they can, you know, And I'm not saying they're wrong for this. I'm just saying we
But
should.
this is that's the predominant culture, and so you and Jose in that environment were always like kind of a guest in their culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel about it. Thank you. That's exactly what I feel about animation and TV in general, right? So when you see, but mainly animation, there are some TV shows that do different things, but when you watch animation, you're watching people of color be guests in something that is mainly for a mainstream, you know.
Right. But I kind of wonder though, isn't that sort of just life in general, right? The life in America. So what I say is like we talk about like code switching to be in a certain environment, but like okay, so let's just say we're in like an old black environment, and a white person comes in, and they start kind of changing how they talk. Don't we kind of like side eye them? Like really, So
yeah,
you know what I mean?
because we do that because we don't have a lot of spaces that are just ours.
Mm.
So we're not doing that because we're dominating in the movement of, like a lot of our culture is utilized in daily life. So I'm not going to pretend like we don't have influence, but we don't own that influence, right?
Right.
We
Right.
we just have the influence, right? We're not profiting financially. Our communities are not better because we have that influence. So when somebody is code switching to sound like us, we could kind of recognize, oh, wait a minute, you're actually, in your mind, you're downgrading to me. When I code switch, in my mind, I'm actually upgrading because I have to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do it, right? Like when you and I code switch at a job, we do that to keep a job. There's no white person, and I don't want to just single out white people, but you're not.
Just anyone who code switches in a black environment.
Yeah, to keep their job. What? You're not doing that to keep a job. Nobody's talking, with a stereotypically, gay affectation to keep a job because
Right.
then, a heterosexual isn't like, hey, let me, right? Like, so that's
Right.
not,
Totally.
that's not the case, right? So there I would say it does mimic life, but I think that's part of the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. I don't know. It's so interesting to me because it's like we, how do you, in your mind, how do you think that we work toward or solve that issue? Because again, going back to life, I
Right.
firmly believe that that's like this is a non-ethnic world, and we all live in it.
Right.
Like, so how do you? And it's been interesting to see because again, like kind of like you said, like if we look at just in the last 5 years how media has shifted, we do see the physical representation of different cultures, different, whatever it might be. But that still doesn't kind of take the actual cultures and make them mainstream. Is that something that you think, and this is a really
Mhm.
big question, is
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that something that you think will ultimately happen, or do you think that there's a pathway to that happening, um, or do you think it's something that just can't happen?
Well, let me ask you a question before I answer that. When you say a non-ethnic world, do you mean non-ethnic or do you mean multi-ethnic? Like, do you mean?
When I say we're a non-ethnic world, what I mean is at the end of the day, the British took over the world. And at the end of the day, we live in a white world. Like that's just
Sure,
what it
sure,
is. We
sure,
all,
sure,
no
sure, sure.
matter where you are, even if
Right.
English is not the primary language of your country, if you want to make it in the world and you want some really to be successful, you have to learn English. At the end of the
100%
day,
I agree with you.
Western European history is the history that we all learn, in history class. So that's what I mean. So
I
when I say
understand what you're saying.
non-ethnic, we live, anyone who's not
Right.
Western European, we exist in
You
this
gotta
world.
conform. Right. Okay. I
Yeah,
understand.
you know, so that's what I
Mhm.
mean. And do you think that that's something? Because I always think about the fact, like when I was a little
Mm.
kid, and this is what's so fascinating to me, like when I see kind of what's starting to happen in terms of like, you know, people telling their stories and like, you know, when you see like what's going on like on Twitter as a result of like the Israeli-Palestine conflict, we see more people saying, I'm a Muslim, I'm a this, I'm a that. And I think that that's so fascinating because when I was a kid, I grew up in a very, very ethnically diverse community. We always, my childhood friend, we always joke and say, I grew up in this place called Forest Park, Illinois. And we always joke and say, we grew up in the Noah's Ark of minorities because it was mostly a white town, but we both went to different elementary schools, but like there was always two Black kids, there were two Indian kids, there were two Asian kids, there were two Latino kids. I had an Iranian friend, but in that time, the modus operandi was about um, assimilating.
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
like
Yeah.
I love Indian food, but I was thinking about this. Like, so one of my best friends from the time I was in kindergarten until I graduated, you know, eighth grade to go into high school, you know, he was one of my best friends, and I grew up across the street from him. But I never actually had Indian food until I was an
Okay.
adult. You know, anytime I was at his house, you know, his mother would make hot dogs and hamburgers, you know, and
Oh,
that
okay.
period of time, it was about assimilating, right? Like not learning. Like I know people my age and even older than me who are maybe first generation, whose parents didn't teach, like they can't speak their parents' native tongue because it was about you're an American and you're supposed to do this. And I see that changing. And there was a point to why I was going down this. But there's a
So
point why
you
I
were
was
saying,
going.
but I think where you were going was that even though it was there was so many different kinds of people, you guys were all still trying to assimilate. Like that was
kind
the
of kind of like what you were saying that like you see in cartoons now. Like we were the Benetton ad,
right, right,
but
right,
everyone was
right.
still American.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I think like this, right? I think if I had if I could direct people toward a goal, it would be because I actually love the fact I love that there are so many different kinds of people. I live in New York, right? And I love that I see so many different kinds of people whenever I'm on the train, right? I
Right.
like I do a thing when I get on the train. I like to count how many different kinds of people are all riding the train, going to do whatever they're going to do, and but they all are here, and whether they have different religions, whether they have there's just all kinds of different kinds of people, right?
Mhm.
I think that makes us better. And I think that we, like, I don't, I hear people say, oh, we should think about the things that make us similar more than we should think about the things that make us different. I think, and personally, I think the opposite. I think we should want to experience the things that make us different so that we understand why others are the way they are and the beauty of that, right?
Mhm.
Right. There's beauty in your background. There's beauty in my background. There's beauty in other people's backgrounds. We shouldn't. So one, I think we shouldn't be so guarded by our backgrounds, but there's reasons why we are. But we don't need to be as guarded with our backgrounds and who we are. And then others shouldn't. The idea of racism isn't just that people are prejudiced; is that I'm going to hold you back because of your race or whatever the
Right.
case, right?
How you
So
speak,
how you speak, right?
whatever it might be, what you wear, how whatever.
Right.
You wear a hijab, or you
Right.
wear you totally got it.
Right. So I think that is actually the great thing about different cultures, having a bunch of different cultures around you, is that you get to actually experience, like you said, imagine if you would have went and had Indian food at the Indian family's home instead of hot dogs, right?
Mm.
Like how that would have opened you up culturally, right?
Yeah,
Like, and if you'd have went to the Iranian family and you would have had food from their region, and then if you would have had, you know what I mean, like Puerto
totally.
Rican family, right? And like you just have all of these different experiences in, is this outside of Chicago, I'm imagining, or
Yeah, it's a suburb of Chicago. Yeah.
Chicago, right? Like, so in a place where, it's a metropolitan, Chicago is obviously a metropolitan city, but some in this suburb where you have all of these different people, um, yes, it breaks down these barriers that we have up, but also it makes you appreciate and wonder about what it would be like to live in these places, and what these, it makes you wonder, right? And then, so then what happens is, then let's bring it back to why we're here and what we're talking about. So then when you watch something on television, you don't think, well, there's no market for this thing. There's no market for these people. There's no market for these people. What you're thinking is, oh, finally, I get to see that
What it
Indian
was like for my
family.
friend to like where they're from, or what
Yeah,
like when his Mr.
right,
Das did blah 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 blah. Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's actually, and yes, the British colonized. Let me tell you, okay, I just said I came from Japan. In Japan, everything is in English, right? So I was really nervous about going to Japan. Um, this was a trip that my youngest son wanted to go. He wanted to check out some skating stuff. Um, and just, it was just like a whole bunch of stuff that he wanted to check out. My wife wanted to go. So we go, and I was just like, you know what? I'm not really enthusiastic about going. None of us speak Japanese. Like, we can't read the characters. This seems like it's going to be a lot of hard work, right?
Mhm. Which is
Um,
the last thing you want to do for your holiday vacation.
that's the last thing
Right?
you want to do, right? So we get there. First of all, I mean, we had a couple of guides, but first of all, you know, Google Translate does it all. Um, like, just in terms of being able to real time put it up against a menu, it'll just pop up in English what it is, right? So if there's not that, but but a lot of times you actually didn't need it, because when you get on the train, they speak in Japanese, but then they're going to speak in English, the way, and you can actually understand them on the train, not like New York, but like, but so like when they're like, okay, we're going to pull into this stop in Tokyo, blah, 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 they say it in Japanese and then they say it in English. I think they also say it in Korean and a Chinese dialect. I'm not sure which one, but, but yeah, so they say it in English. Clearly, it's written in English. There's always instructions, there's signage on the streets, there's all kinds of stuff, right? So to your point, the British, by way of, the UK or by way of the Americas, have colonized and influenced the planet, right? So globally, um Western culture, and also just like what I was noticing also in Japan, is how westernized the culture was, right? Um, it was, I think, Jose and I was speaking, and I think I told him that if you can live in Japan, like you can come from here and live in Japan, and it's a total
And
one.
it's not like, oh my goodness, I'm living in a
No,
completely different
no.
environment where I culturally it makes no sense to me, or like I don't
Yeah,
understand it.
you would totally get it. You just have to learn the language so that you can, communicate better with people. But for the most part, well, first of all, most people know some English there. And most places I've been to India, I've been to
And most people know some basic English.
most places, the most furthest places, right? I've been to 6 countries in Africa. I've been to India. I've been to, you know, I've been in the islands and different places. Most places speak some level of English, right? Dubai, and
Even if it's just as basic as "Hi, how are you? Come in."
that it just as basic as that, right? So to your point, yes, this is a very like we are moving in a direction where Western culture, particularly spearheaded by English speaking, is sort of like a cultural norm, a cultural standard. Um, and that's fine. It is what it is. I mean, I have my issues with that, but I do think that that is just great to share differences. It's
Yeah.
great to share differences.
Well, but so then what do you think? Because this is something in the same way that, like, you know, English is kind of the standard of the world in terms of how we communicate. You were saying earlier about how Black culture proliferates, and yet the Black American, let's be real, Black American culture.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm very strong about that because I think that as Black Americans, we are like, we're almost like our own race. Like, we're unique. We're not Caribbean. We're not African. Like, just, we were baked, and our
Yeah.
culture comes from just being in America. What do you think about the fact that, like, Black American culture also proliferates the world, right? If you listen to music in any country, they could be singing in Arabic, but there are hip hop influences.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
If you, what are your what do you think about that, and the way that Black American culture proliferates the world, the same way that British culture proliferates the world, but it is
It's
given the same
it's
deference.
funny. It's funny. I don't actually mind that outside of the United States. In
Mhm.
the United States, I have some issues. Outside of the United States, I don't really because um I don't know. I can't necessarily pinpoint it, but I think it's just like, once you're outside of the United States, once you're outside of your whatever country that you're talking about, this is just how the world sees you. And then the world is going to interpret that thing how they interpret it, right? Like
Right.
when I was in Zimbabwe, right? 2002, and I had locks, long locks, right? And a school bus drives up. Like we're by this old tree, the oldest, largest baobab tree in Zimbabwe or something. So we're like looking at this tree, and there's a school bus pulling up because they're gonna go to this tree. And the kids see me and they're like, "Oh, Busta Rhymes, Busta Rhymes, Busta Rhymes." Now, first of all, what's crazy is that in 2002, um, Busta Rhymes was that influential in Zimbabwe.
In Zimbabwe, like, they're like, oh.
Right? They're like Busta Rhymes, Busta Rhymes. The very next thing they said, right, was "What's up, my end? What's up, my end? What's up, my end?" Right? And I was like, wow, that's what we bring globally. That, the N word is what we're synonymous with our culture. And I
Mhm.
was like, um, I wish that aspect of us wasn't as prevalent,
Yeah.
but the idea that, that really bothered me. But the idea that Africans in Africa saw an African American, they just saw me. They knew I wasn't Busta Rhymes, right? But they
Mhm.
saw me as also a celebrity. They saw
Like
me
an avatar for him.
like an avatar.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a great, yes. Right. Like, but they also, but so, because they saw themselves, like they were like, "Oh wow." But at the same time, I was like, you know, I was glad that we had that influence, but I was also angry at how we abuse that influence.
Yeah. Well, I think, can I tell you, I think the N word is one of those things because I think that, you know, it's like it's now socially not okay for anyone who's not Black to use the word, but we've proliferated it in the culture that we produce to where it's a part of it. I remember watching Oprah Winfrey show was still on, and she had a conversation with, I remember she was interviewing Jay-Z. And she was telling him why she didn't like the fact that that word was used in media, because she's like, you know, what the history of the word, what it means, what it meant is so horrible that we should not perpetuate it. And he was like, well, no, we've reclaimed it, blah, 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 blah. We'll agree to disagree. And so it's interesting for you to say that, like, the first thing as soon as you stop in Zimbabwe, they're like, hey, and we're what's like, I just, what do you think about that and how that's, you know, because it's one thing, it's like there's like one thing, like kitchen table talk is one thing, right? Like what we say around the kitchen table is one thing, but what we proliferate through our art and our cultural endeavors are another. Like what do you think about that?
So this is what I told my son, right? I told my kids this. I said, so people, you know, like Jay-Z or different rappers or whatever, will say, you know, we've reclaimed it, it's a term of endearment, it's this, and that. Well, actually, it has several meanings, right? It has several meanings. So here's a practice I told him, I said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to instead use the words that you actually mean instead of the N word. I says, let me give you an example. Sometimes when you're talking when you say the N word, you mean uh somebody who's ignorant or something that's lesser, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it has a negative connotation. So
This dumb,
yeah,
this
right, dumb,
fool.
right. So
Mm-hmm.
then, right, sometimes you mean it to say, you're talking about a white person, right? So don't say like, because you might say, yo, look at this, you know, but you're talking about a white person. So when you do that, say cracker. Because you're making a racial, no, because you're making a racial reference. So if you're going to make
Right,
a racial reference, I want you to see how uncomfortable it is to call them actually what you're thinking, right?
right, right.
And when you mean it as a term of endearment, then say that. See how often you use the term of endearment to mean a term of the N word as a term of endearment.
Ah, yeah, yeah,
So what you're saying to me is that you're actually using the word for what it was originally intended.
yeah.
So 75% of the time, you're
You're
saying
using
it the way they actually meant it.
you're
And
using it to demean. You're
yeah,
using it to make some, like you said, less than. You're using it as an insult.
as an insult or a racial epithet, which is also an insult, right? But you're using it exactly for what it was used for. And then sometimes you mean it, oh, my, you know, oh, you know, da da da, ah, my,
But
you
you
know,
could just easily be like, "That's my boy. That's my
yeah,
friend. That's my."
right. So I was like,
I
yeah,
don't
just
say
break
Ace
it
Boon
down.
Boon, but that has its own.
Right. It's cool, cool. Right. So yeah, so just break it down and you'll see, you know, and then just do a little log and then you'll see how many times you actually mean it to say a term of endearment. And it won't be that many times.
Yeah, I think that that's brilliant. I
Yeah.
totally think that that's brilliant. Wow. Yeah. So then what do you think? Because again, like the word is used, right, in films, television, the word is used in music, right? So we
Yeah.
have, because you know, like I have like it's always okay, so it's always weird. Like if I'm hanging with a group of white people, like friends, whatever, and there's a song that everyone knows, and then it gets to that place where it's like the N word is used in this particular song, And it's like, there's some people who are just like, well, it's the lyrics. And then there's other people who then get weird and all of a sudden the room gets silent when that particular word comes. And then the next word, everyone starts singing again. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because again, it's
You're putting it out there.
yeah.
You ever see that? There's a clip of Kendrick Lamar, and he actually put this in a song later in his last album, I think. There's a clip where he's doing he's in a concert. He has a concert and he's performing, and he brings a woman on stage. He was like, okay, who knows the lyrics to this song? So he brings the woman on to the stage, white woman, because let's face it, who can afford your tickets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she gets on stage and she's like, all right, go ahead. And so she's singing the lyrics, she's getting it in, right? And she gets up to the N-word and she says it, right? And he's like, yo, hold on now, like, and he, nah, you don't say that, that's not for you, da 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 da, right? But you put it out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're saying you want all of these people to listen to your music.
And they've spent a lot of money to do it.
And they spent a lot of money to do it.
Whatever. They've spent a lot of money for the privilege of enriching you.
But they're not allowed to ingest the words so commonly used in your lyrics. And again, where sometimes you don't mean it. Sometimes it's a term of endearment. Why can't I say it if it's a term of endearment? Okay, I can understand if I can't use it when you mean it in a very
aggressive, derogatory, hateful, like where you're trying to demean, right. Or yeah.
Right. So I understand that. But if it's positive, if it's a term of endearment, why can't I use it then? Because then I'm not, saying anything that's derogatory, right? It doesn't have,
and it's not coming from me. I'm literally singing along to the song that I like and spent $600 to come and hear you sing. Yeah.
Right.
And you pulled me on stage.
And you pulled me on stage knowing that I wasn't of the people who can say that word. Like, so yeah, so it's definitely listen, growing up, I said it all the time. I was, I used the word all the time. I'm not, I definitely don't condone the use of it anymore. I'm older, but also just think like, even if I wasn't older, I just think that it has so many has a negative history, but it also just has a negative impact.
Yeah. And there's so many other words in the dictionary.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that. But also, and again, I go back to, there's one thing, kitchen table talk and what you put out there are two different, like how your wife, your kids talk when you're in the privacy of your own home is totally different than how you all talk when you're out at a restaurant or out. And so I do, yowzer. So with all of that said, how do you think, we only have a few more minutes left, how do you think with all that we just talked about, Brits owning the world, Black American culture running the world, white people singing along to the N-word. Do you think, and again, maybe there's no answer to this because it is a big question, do you think that there is a path to, whether it's an animation or live action, to getting beyond what you said you see in entertainment now?
I do.
The childhood that I have, being beyond just the superficial diversity.
I do, and I think it'll get there. I don't know how soon. I think it'll get there. I think it'll get there with repetition, right? Like for a while, white actresses, specifically actors too, but actresses didn't, like they didn't have them with Black actors, like, right? For up until like really, really recently, gay men couldn't show affection or, God forbid, a sex scene without it being a rated, like without
rated actually, like this is something, don't send your kids home. Don't
Yeah, you know what I mean? Right. So, but with the repetition of it, some people are going to be like, oh, I can't, why do they keep doing that? Why do they keep showing that? But after a while, you get, okay, just wait on. After a while.
Isn't that insane? I had no idea. That's like really messed up. So for you in the listening audience, Jose just gave us the pop-up video bubble that told us that the bird-cage, which I don't think has any profanity in it, and is rated R. That's insane. That's really bizarre.
Watch that again. That's with that was
Robin Williams and Nathan Lane.
Nathan Lane, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's the remake of La Cage aux Folles. But I'm sorry. I continue.
Yeah. So I just say, like, I just, just to capsulize that, like, it's just like we just have to do it. It has to be repetition, and we have to get to a point where it's a no-brainer, right? It is what it is, right? We know this is a part of life. This is a part of everyday life, and it helps us to see it. It doesn't need to be salacious. It doesn't need to be gratuitous. It needs to be normal.
Right.
And that is what that's what I think we can get to. I think we will get to that. And I'm very much for that. I'm for real diversity in that sense.
Yeah. It needs to become rote.
Yeah.
Kind of like a white person who knows all the songs and just sings the N-word because
right. Like, I mean, that's the other side of it. Like, somebody's going to make that as an argument, right? Like that, oh, okay, so then we just need to get used to that. And I'm like, but I mean, that's the other side of it, right? Like, I'll never get to that point. But yeah.
I'm just being stupid. But oh my God, it's been so great catching up with you. We're basically at the end of our time. Is there anything that you have popping, that you have coming up, that you want to share with us?
Nothing. I got things in the works, and so nothing to really report yet. But when I do, I will definitely let Jose know and and then maybe we'll have another re-up.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's been so great catching up with you.
You too.
And thank you all for joining us. And we will talk to you on another episode next week of Showtime with Jordan Van Hassel and Friends, right here on Hot 702.5 FM Las Vegas. Oh, and before we leave though, Jose just asked me, where can we find you? Are you up on social media? Do you post regularly? Where can our listeners hear you?
Yeah, I'm on I'm on all the social media platforms, but I don't post. I don't really post that often. But my name is Nikon Kwantu, and you can find me on social media. I don't even know. I think that's just what you find on social media, Nikon Kwantu. But
okay.
But yeah, I don't really. I'm on social media. I watch stuff, but for me, social media is fun, right? So I watch it for fun, right?
Right. It's like you're scrolling. You're not there to post. You're there.
No, not really.
Yeah, I get it. So in other words, we're your outlet. So if you want to know what's going on with Nikon, keep listening to Showtime, because we will give you all of the updates at least once a year.
And if you have any business inquiries and you want to reach out to me on social media, Instagram is good, because I'm always on Instagram, so you can DM me. I will respond if it's in business. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Nikon. Thank you all. And I don't know what's coming up in the next hour, but we'll see you all next week right here on Hot 702.5 FM.
Good. All right. See you guys.